Good morning, everybody. In the summer of 1973, I was camping with some friends in a dark part of Michigan, and we looked up at the sky at night, and there was this white streak that zipped across the sky. And it was Skylab, our first space station, which was launched on this date, May 14, in that year, 1973. The first mention of a space station in a book was this one, The Brick Moon and Other Stories, published in 1868. How about that? 1929, Herman Potocnik theorized about a space station that was a rotating wheel in order to create artificial gravity. And in 1951, Werner von Braun, the German who was now in our space program, had a series of articles in Collier's Weekly where he picked up that theme of the circular space station. So all through the 60s, we had the Mercury, Gemini, and Apollo programs for getting somebody on the moon, and the idea of a space platform to observe the Earth changed as technology got better and we had transistors and things. So there was a feeling that satellites can do more than manned missions. So they rethought the manned missions and thought maybe we should just go right to the moon. We have the rocket for it. Here's the Saturn V in Houston, and Skylab will be associated with that rocket. So here's what Skylab looked like. It was a round cylinder, quite big, incorporated into the total structure of the rocket. And one of the justifications for Skylab was to keep the NASA funding flowing. So here's a chart of the NASA budget, and you can see by 1970 it's really starting to drop. So how do you keep all those people employed? Well, let's work on a space station. So all through the 60s, they were practicing how to have space vehicles dock, partly because Skylab itself was going up empty, and then astronauts would go up there and enter it. And one thing they had to figure out was how can 6 people live in an enclosed space for long periods of time? So they practiced in submarines. And one of the criticisms of the early space flights was the food was terrible. So as they went toward the space station mode, they tried to make the food better because the astronauts are going to be up there for a while. Well, July 21, 1969, we landed on the moon. There were a few more moon landings after, but then the ones after that were canceled, so there were more Saturn V rockets available. 1971, the Russians put up the first space station, Salyut 1, and here's a drawing of it. So they beat us to it by a couple of years. So here's our event. May 14, 1973, Saturn rocket took off with Skylab as part of the structure. And here's a cutaway version of Skylab, and it was really big. I think people are surprised how big it was. And it had all kinds of space in it for living and eating and lab stuff and so on. They were focusing again on the comfort of the astronauts, and here's a mock-up of one of the compartments in Skylab. So that was a big improvement over those early Gemini and Apollo capsules where they were just crammed in there. So one of the justifications for Skylab was science, and here's a list of some of the experiments they did with optics and gravity and computers and so on. Well, the space shuttle first went up in 1981, so that made the Skylabs redundant. They didn't really need them anymore, or those missions. And in 1979, Skylab started to fall to the Earth, and they predicted that it would fall somewhere across Australia. So everybody was looking up in the sky. And when it did re-enter the atmosphere, tremendous light show of the parts of Skylab burning up as it re-entered the atmosphere, and parts of it fell over Australia. And one of the fuel tanks was actually pulled out of the ocean near Australia by some fishermen, I think it was, some years later, and that's on display in Huntsville, Alabama, at the rocket place. So the space story has lots of moving parts, and the big thing for us, 1973, Skylab.